again, it was about not doing something out of regularity, out of habit. So let's get to some of the texts. So the other two things he did was he wrote a book that the title of the book is one of the most misleading titles, because it's called Ha'akdama v'Hapsicha, the introduction, the preface. Who reads preface? Who reads introductions? You skip it, right? I don't know about you, but me, 9 out of 10 times I go to the book. But he wrote a whole book that's an introduction to his father's book, the Beis Yaakov on Bereshis. But the name of the book is totally misleading, because in this book he tackles some of the most major concepts in Hasidus and Kabbalah, and that's by and large, I would say, a big. That is what, for the most part, a good, Shemah Gid's book, Hasidism on the Margin, is explaining various parts of the Hakdama, and I'll share a little bit with you, and then I know we have to go to the text already.
What's the question? We talk about doing the mitzvahs.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a relationship with God.
Yeah. Well, you have a relationship with
there.
What do you mean? How do you?
These are like very, very learned spiritual people, but doing mitzvahs, it seems that they would have the relationship.
Well, they do have the relationship with God, but like anything else, like a relationship is a dynamic relationship. It's if I have a relationship with somebody, there's certain principles that you want to have in place, but there's certain things that are like alive, that are happening at this moment, not just because they happened yesterday. Otherwise it gets boring. So the question is, what's the balance between halacha and finding kind of this things in the world to elevate, things in the world to see whether or not they can, kind of some neutral areas, the areas that are not so clear, but I can go in there and I can make them holy. And that's where the action is. The activity is in those questionable areas, because that's where, in other words, and this is a frequent teaching of the Meshlach, the paradigm of the holy person who stays in the synagogue and studies doesn't necessarily transform the darkness into light the way the person who goes into a place of doubt in what they're doing, but is ultimately guided by spiritual principles, because they can transform more darkness into light. And that's another question, to know where you are on the ladder of how far you can go into kind of those places of issues and doubts, or whether you should just stay in the straight and narrow and do what you know is what the halacha says to do clearly. So let me just share, you know what, let me share some of this before I get into what he says, because it's really too much to get into all of these great things that Shaul talks about. So I'll just do a little bit. I'll do. I don't know how I'm going to do this quickly. I'll just do a little bit of it. Basically, the first section that he begins the Hakdama with has the following concepts. That, and Lawrence, this will also answer your questions a little bit. What we normally call the written Torah and the oral Torah is referred to the Tanakh as the written Torah, and the Gemara and the Halacha as the oral Torah. He interprets it in the following way. The written Torah means the writing of the Torah. The writing of the Torah conceals within it a great spiritual meaning that is hidden within the words, within the narrative of the Torah or the Halacha. And the oral Torah is to get to the inspiration behind it. So a prophet, when a prophet prophesies, they're trying to bring through their own kind of inspiration. They're trying to bring in not the word, but the fire. Not the text, but the experience of the divine. And that, he says, goes back to Abraham. We say Avram Avinu fulfilled the whole Torah. What does it mean he fulfilled the whole Torah? So there's a beautiful midrashic explanations. He did Shabbos. He didn't just keep the written Torah. He already knew the Shulchan Aruch. He did like rabbinic law also. But what does that mean? So the Hasidic explanation based on the Kabbalah is that Kloyos Yoatzot, I think it's Gemara that says that. His kidneys were giving him advice. They were like two advisors, or maybe it's a medrash. It's a rabbinic teaching. It says he was sitting and his kidneys were coming and giving him all this advice of what he should do, and he was doing it. Which means that he intuitively had a relationship with God on his own. It wasn't because he had the mitzvah. He didn't have the mitzvah. There was no Torah. There was no Shulchan Aruch. But he felt what he had to do as being in a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in a sense, the Torah tells us what you do. But are you really in a relationship with Torah? Again, just like I said before, many people study Torah, but forgot about the person who gave Torah. Many people can keep the law and not really be connected to the source of the law. So if the law is just a social thing that keeps us safe from each other, that's fine. I don't need you to care about really the intent of stopping at the red light, which is safety. As long as you stop at the red light, I'll be safe. You might be afraid of getting a ticket, but if that makes you stop, you stop, and I'm saying everybody is safe. But if the intention is not just about a social code to prevent injury of one another, but it's about a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God, so then the intention, the kavanah, is an integral part of it. And the kavanah is the sod. You know, I'll teach you a Baal Shem Tov teaching, which I taught when we're doing the series of Baal Shem Tov. But it's really appropriate to this. Is the Baal Shem Tov would go around and he would say, what does it mean? So, a secret. He says, Eitz Chaim is a secret because it's hidden, because it doesn't make any sense. So there's a book. And he says, Gemara also is like hidden if you don't know how to learn it. We don't call it so just because it's hard to learn. You have to spend a few years to break the Sefer barrier and go through enough of Shas to really get it, It's not a sod. He says the sod is not even the words or even the meaning. The sod is the experience. If you learn the Zohar and it's just ideas, that's not a sod. That's an intellectual idea. If you experience it, that's a secret. In other words, the meaning is not just the intellectual meaning, but the actual feeling. So in a sense, even though the esoteric, the Kabbalah, the Zohar, the other writings of the Kabbalah are meant to be understood intellectually to some level, but the poetry and the depth of the experience is at the heart of what Hasidus says is the core of what Kabbalah, the experience of Sod should be, the secrets of Torah should be. So comes Gershon Henoch and says, firstly, so that becomes lost in the Torah. And he says that was originally purposefully concealed in the rabbinic writings. Now, in the Gemara, they were concealing the Sod of the Torah. And they were revealing only the exoteric, the practice of what you do, but not the meaning.